Hi all, this is the case study presentation for Sophia Lowe and Lindsay Emery. Today we will talk about Toms River in Ashland, Massachusetts. So in 1964, there was evidence that the SIBA plant had contaminated Toms River but was ignored. And between 1980 and 1990, children in Toms River, New Jersey, started falling ill to cancer, specifically leukemia and tumors of the brain. This then raised the questions towards citizens about the cancer cluster forming in the town and how it might be linked to the SIBA plant. The SIBA plant is a dye company, and they did not remove of waste properly, which led to the contamination of the river and drinking water of the town. The most vulnerable population in Toms River were the children and the citizens that were drinking the water. This is because that even though they tried switching where they got their drinking water supply from, it still was contaminated due to the improper disposal of waste from the dye company. Two chemicals that were involved in this contamination were epichlorohydrin and nitrobenzene. Epichlorohydrin is colorless and has a garlic-like odor. Some possible sources in the Toms River contamination were the water in the town and then the inhalation when the fishermen were on the water. Nitrobenzene is pale and has an odor that smells like almonds. Some possible sources of exposure for nitrobenzene were the drinking water and then inhalation in the workplace at Toms River, specifically the SIBA plant. Epichlorohydrin can be entered into the body through inhalation, skin absorption, indigestion, and eye contact. Some health effects of epichlorohydrin is pulmonary edema and inflammation of the lungs. Nitrobenzene can be entered through the body almost the same way. Another way, compared to epihydrochlorohydrin, is skin contact. Some health effects of nitrobenzene is it can cause cancer, can also cause oxygen to be decreased in blood cells. Some prevention methods that both the state or the government or the people of Toms River, specifically the SIBA plant, could have done to prevent this could be an early exposure assessment. By doing this, the contaminants could have been fully assessed and could have led to less exposure throughout the town. More tracking of where the public was disposing of their waste would have also been a key point in leading to less exposure. If the public health department tracked where the company was disposing of their waste, the improper disposal could have been caught sooner, which could have led to less cancer diagnoses. The public health department, as well as the SIBA plant, could have put together a proper disposal plan, which could have had guidelines of what the company had to do to properly dispose of any of their waste. A pro of the SIBA plant is that they paid the cost and the fines, as well as they admitted to improper waste disposal. They also worked to fix the water after the fact. Some cons is that there was clear evidence that they were improperly disposing of the waste from their company, which is what contaminated the water. They also illegally dumped waste into the water and soil of Toms River. And then it was also put out that they wanted and tried to dump waste into the ocean. A pro of the government side is that they conducted an extensive evaluation of the childhood cancer rates from 1979 to 1995. The New Jersey Department of Health also worked closely with the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry for an exposure assessment and possible risk factors. The government also ran a drinking water quality analysis to make sure water was safe to drink. A con of the government is that they only tested the water for one or two chemicals when there were many chemicals present in the water. The government also waited a long time from once citizens complained to when they did the exposure assessment, which led to more incidents of childhood cancer. They also did not use carbon filters. Our selected location is Ashland, Massachusetts. This had a Nyanza chemical waste dump from 1917 to 1978. This site produced textile dyes, intermediates, and other projects on their sites. This had large volumes of industrial wastewater, which contained high levels of acid and lots of organic and inorganic chemicals, including mercury. This led to soil and groundwater contamination. In the early 1980s, there was an environmental study at the site which documented widespread chemical contamination at and around the site, which then stated that there were more than 45,000 tons of chemical sludge which was buried on the Nyanza site. The most vulnerable population in Ashland, Massachusetts, at the Nyanza chemical site were young adults and children who lived in the town and played near or by the site. They also could have been susceptible if they were playing in the soils and the lagoons on or around the Nyanza chemical site. With this, kind of like Tom's River, there were lots of chemicals involved. Two chemicals that were involved were benzidine and copper. Benzidine is a carcinogen substance, and the possible sources of exposure could have been the groundwater. Ways of entry into the body for benzidine is ingestion, such as eating and drinking, skin contact, inhalation, and inhalation. Some health effects are skin contact, which could be skin allergy, and at high exposures can cause cancer, such as urinary or bladder cancer. If ingested, it can lead and affect stomach, kidney, brain, mouth, and liver. Copper is essential for our health, but in high doses can be very harmful. Possible sources of exposure to copper could have been the fish tissue, groundwater, soil, and surface water. Ways of entry into the body is ingestion, such as eating and drinking, skin contact, and inhalation. Some health effects of inhaling copper is irritation in the nose, mouth, and eyes, which can lead to headache, nausea, and diarrhea. At high doses, copper can cause liver and kidney damage and sometimes death. It is still unknown if copper can cause cancer or not. As mentioned in the Tom River case, early exposure can be really helpful in reducing the effect from the contamination or even to no exposure. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health should have regulations or legislations for disposal plans for the facilities. There should also be regular checks for the waste disposal plan before the start of every facility. In addition, hazardous waste disposal procedures should be conducted by the Department of Public Health. It is important to have proper waste disposal procedures and have regular check-ins to prevent any exposure of contamination. It is also important to follow the legal procedures for waste disposal. Some pros of the Nyanza plant is that they did not dispose the waste to the drinking water. Some cons is they did not dispose the waste properly, although they didn't put it in the water. They did not have any proper disposal procedure, which made them dispose the chemical into the pond where citizens might play and catch the fish that they eat. They also did not set the site entering limit properly, letting children play on their contaminated site. Some pros of the government is that they shut down the site at the first stage to set up proper cleaning up stages. They also capped the hill section to prevent water from entering and spreading contaminants. The off-site groundwater was reinstalled, and they reinstalled all the systems. The wetlands remedy for contaminated sediment and surface water between the site and Sudbury River. Some cons of the government is that they were not transparent enough for letting the citizens understand clearly what is happening. Some of their citizens were still under concern about safety. The government did not set up legislation based off waste disposal, especially on large facilities that might have lots of hazardous waste. They should have set up regular check-ins before actually starting up the facility. They also worked at very slow pace like they did with Tom's River. Here are our references, and thank you for listening to our presentation.